Tonight, we continue our coverage of the breaking news we first brought you on KXAN News at 5 and 6. Last year's huge South by Southwest Music Festival overshadowed by an accused drunk driver plowing his car into a crowd of fans. And today, victims and their families filed lawsuits against the two private companies that own the festival, South by Southwest Holdings Incorporated and South by Southwest LLC, along with the traffic design consultant South by Southwest hired to oversee the road closures, as well as the driver who ran through the crowd, Rashad Owens. You will remember Owens is now charged with capital murder for his role in the crash that killed 18-year-old DeAndre Tatum, 26-year-old Sandy Lee, 27-year-old Jamie West, and 35-year-old Stephen Cranmer.
When it comes to the city's response, we're about to see big changes coming to security at festivals like this. KXAN investigator Robert Maxwell will walk us through those details in just a few minutes.
But first, I sat down with the widows of victims Jamie West and Stephen Cranmer to talk about life after the crash and why they say these lawsuits are part of their healing.
People shouldn't go through this, and if there's responsibility, something that can be done, I want that to be done. There wouldn't be a lawsuit if I didn't have hope that that change can happen.
What was Stephen like?
Stephen was a very positive man, inspiring a lot of people, me, his son, his brothers. He was caring for a lot of people. And he was the best man and friend, father, son you can have. South by Southwest is accountable for this tragedy, in my thought.
Now, as far as what those families are claiming in their lawsuits, here's a breakdown. Wrongful death and negligence, that the crash was a preventable, foreseeable tragedy. Some of the main points: that rigid barriers should have been in place to stop the suspect's car, and that organizers should have realized the higher degree of drunk driver risk because of excessive DWI and public intoxication arrests in past festival years. And perhaps the reason the lawsuit isn't also against the city of Austin: festival organizers had legal possession of the street where the crash happened because of their right-of-way permit. We reached out to South by Southwest for comment this evening, and a spokesperson tells us, quote, "What happened on Red River was a terrible tragedy caused by Rashad Owens' utter disregard of human life. Our hearts continue to ache for those injured and the families of those who lost their lives. We look forward to his prosecution for his awful crimes."
With safety concerns after the South by Southwest crash, we've now learned the City of Austin's Exiting Council just approved recommendations to enhance safety at major festival events. KXAN investigator Robert Maxwell has been looking into what's changed since last year's tragedy.
You won't notice it when South by returns to town in March, but there's been a shift among city event planners who oversee the spring festival. They acknowledge South by is not just a singular event. In fact, it's nearly 100, and the cumulative effect of all those people can have a real impact on safety.
From its humble beginnings in 1987, when 700 people showed up,
we're having fun.
to last year's 180 permitted events and 80,000 registered participants, the conferences and stages of South by Southwest are now a global draw. In the last 5 years, bringing $1 billion in economic benefit to Austin. Because the city co-sponsors South by Southwest, it has a direct interest in keeping festival goers safe. Unlike ACL Fest at Zilker Park, South by crowds can shift and swell across downtown streets when an unannounced performer shows up, or when promoters on social media spread word of one of thousands of secret parties. Add to that, this city report produced after last year's South by found most safety issues stem from events not sanctioned by organizers. What the city can control are the official events. This new ordinance is built around safety as a top priority. Code enforcement teams will be increased to enforce crowd limits.
A lot of people have a problem getting to a certain venue when there's so many people you can't move.
And for the first time, the city's special events program manager, Bill Mano, says businesses seeking entertainment licenses are required to submit safety plans, not just for inside their venues, but outside where people line up.
The majority of the business out there do a great job. Some businesses in the past didn't think it was a responsibility to worry about what goes on outside and they're on the sidewalks. And we've had issues where crowds will completely block sidewalks and go into open lanes of traffic.
Last year we were kind of reactive. We had to go, okay, well, there's a crowd building over here. We had to find out why. It was a surprise event. We didn't know how many people were going to be in it. Now we're going to have all that information.
On the ground, police face keeping unwanted traffic off of closed streets packed with pedestrians, but still keeping them accessible for emergency vehicles. Weeks after the South by tragedy, APD had already adapted its response. For the 2014 Texas Relays crowds, the department used more vehicles as street barricades. South by, though, is spread out across Austin's downtown.
It's been suggested there's so many intersections and road closures, it'll be all but impossible to put a police vehicle at each one of those.
Correct. We're going to look at the key ones. We're going to look at the most important ones where we're going to have the most dense crowd. But there's also secondary things that we can do. That's going to be the unmarked vehicles that are still going to probably have an officer there, but it'll still serve as that physical barricade.
Assistant Chief Jason Dusterhoff also says brighter nighttime lighting will be going in along major corridors like East 6th Street. And in a first, APD will combine the security extra street officers bring with portable, covert surveillance cameras.
Now that helps us have real-time information about when crowds are building, when issues are happening, and that's going to be key.
As for South by purists who might criticize our local elected leaders for over-regulating their festival this year, Bill Mano says his special events team recommended very few new ordinances. Instead, he said, putting a focus on stepping up enforcement of existing ones. At Austin City Hall, Robert Maxwell, KXAN investigates.
Along with those changes, we also learned the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission will be cracking down events serving free alcohol next year. Getting liquor liability insurance will be part of a new ordinance for events on public property. And the city will stagger cutoff times for events to limit the flow of people in the streets. Online right now, you'll find all of our previous coverage of the South by Southwest crash, along with a timeline of events in this case. Just search for this story on the homepage.